Hello, everyone. Today I will be discussing an example for the community assessment paper. As always, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to email me. We can set up a Fuse meeting or a phone call. So the example I'll be using the evidence-based question of what are the most effective interventions to increase the activity level of children with autism in St. Louis. So my paper would start with an executive summary, which would be a maximum of 1 page, probably more along the lines of half a page. And this would be a summary of all of the contents of the paper. So I'm not going to go into great detail on that, but there is a description. The full assignment description does go into more detail. For my introduction, I would start with a review of the population. I'd provide a little background on autism, and I would discuss how children with autism have been found through research to be less engaged in exercise, physical activity, and they're also at a greater risk of being overweight or obese compared to children who do not have autism. And I would go into more detail about that. I would then go into looking at the community and the problem within the community. So I'd provide a little information on the background of St. Louis. I'd pull my census data that I had done earlier in the semester to provide a background on St. Louis, some demographic characteristics. I could pull information from my needs assessment or my asset map to give the paper some additional information on St. Louis. Then I would go into the prevalence of autism in St. Louis. So I would figure out, how many children in St. Louis have autism. If that information is not available, which it may or may not be, depending on your specific population and problem, I could pull the information either on the state level or the country level, depending on at what level it is available. Obviously, the closer to the community you can find the information, the better. But it's not always easily accessible at each individual level, especially for something as small as autism, because there wouldn't be we're talking about a few hundred kids in St. Louis who have autism. I would then give a background on the problem. So let's say 30% of children with autism have been found to be overweight or obese compared to 20% of typically developing children. Additionally, children with autism have been found to engage in 1 hour of physical activity each week compared to children who don't have autism who engage in 2 hours of exercise each week. All of these numbers are things that I have found in research. So you would be pulling information from different research articles for the introduction and the other parts of the paper. I would then move into providing more data and information about the problem. So I would be pulling stuff more from research findings, my discussions with key stakeholders, community observations, census data again. If there's information that's collected by organizations, I could pull that as well. So it may be that in research findings, I found that there was a link between autism and physical activity from my key stakeholders. I learned that it was difficult to engage children with autism in physical activity because they really require one-on-one assistance. They can't just go out and join their local sports team like a lot of other kiddos. And they also have difficulties staying engaged in structured sports activities. From my community observation, as a community member, I've observed that children with autism really prefer screen activities such as video games or TV. So a lot of times they don't want to engage in exercise because it's not a preferred activity for them. I could then give information on the background of the local political activities and social structures. For example, St. Louis County, which is a separate entity from St. Louis City. St. Louis County has extensive funding for individuals with autism to receive recreational assistance. So they are called recreational vouchers, and it's through Developmental Disabilities Resource Board. So they can receive recreation vouchers, adaptive bikes, which helps them pay for recreational activities. However, this funding is not available for individuals who live within the city of St. Louis. So there's a lot less resources within the city versus if you live in the county of St. Louis. There's this great divide between the city and the county, and there's a lot of different resources depending on where you live. My example is focused on the city of St. Louis and how they are receiving far less resources than people who live in the county of St. Louis. So then I would go into different stakeholder groups who are working on this issue. The Recreation Council of St. Louis is a clearinghouse for different recreation activities for individuals with disabilities. And then there's several nonprofits who are also specifically engaged on trying to increase different activity levels of kids with autism or developmental disabilities in general. I would then move into findings. What has the research kind of said might be an effective intervention. So based on my resources, I would discuss the needs and the gaps in the community. So what I found was that interventions for children with autism that have been effective in increasing activity level have provided one-on-one support. They're free for families. They're unstructured activities. And they offer swimming. Swimming is definitely a preferred activity for kids with autism. So anytime we can involve swimming in the mix, this is a great opportunity to get kids more physically engaged. I also found that the city of St. Louis lacks funding to provide these activities free of charge for families. Additionally, there's not enough individuals who are trained in working with individuals with autism. So although sometimes there's volunteers available, they not always have sufficient training to fully engage the children in the activities. Then I would move into my recommendations. So I would discuss my possible community interventions, and based on the research and the findings I received from my key stakeholder and talking to community members, running and swim programs for children with autism will be the most effective to address my evidence-based question. That's because running and swim are both preferred activities for children with autism, and past research has found these activities to increase the physical activity level of children with autism. For both of these interventions, participants would be paired one-on-one with a volunteer or community member, and volunteers would be provided training on specifically engaging kids with autism in activities. I would have a SMART goal for the intervention. So remember the SMART goals that we talked about earlier in the semester. You can find more information in there in past lectures. My SMART goal would be by May 2018, 50 children with autism will have improved attitudes towards exercise and increased physical activity after they have participated in a running and a swimming program. The resources that I would need to carry out this intervention would include facilities such as a running track and a swimming pool. I need money to pay for these facilities and additional equipment. I would need volunteers to assist. And I'd also probably need a partnership with the university faculty member who would be able to provide assistance with evaluation. My evaluation would consist of parents completing a pre and post survey on their children's attitude towards and participation in physical activity. And the goal would be to increase both children's attitude towards physical activity and exercise and their actual participation in physical activity. From there, I would move on to the conclusion, and then I would have any references. And again, as I mentioned earlier, the reference page and the title page do not count towards the number of pages. So the pages for this assignment is 10 to 12 pages. That does not include the reference page, does not include the title page. There's 20 points available for this assignment. Just a reminder, anyone, if you want me to look over either a rough draft or an outline, I'm happy to do so prior. If you get it to me by May 8th, which is the Monday before it's due on the 11th. So if you give me a few days notice, I am happy to look over it for you. I would also encourage you to send it over to the University Writing Services. If you do send it over to Writing Services, you can get 1 point of extra credit on the final paper, which would be applied to your final grade. I would just need them to email me that they read over your paper and that they met with you. Or you can do it. You can either meet with them in person if you are in St. Louis, or you can meet with them online. But 1 point of extra credit, many points of additional credit because you will have much better grammar than if you did not have someone read over it. So if you don't have University Writing Services read over it, have either someone else read over it who's good at grammar, or make sure you are double checking. You will get points off for grammar. I have the list of what's required. The grading rubric is on Blackboard as well, so I would suggest you look over that. There are points towards grammar, so make sure you are looking over your grammar. So this is my example. It'll be a 10 to 12 page paper. If you guys have any questions, please let me know. And again, I just want to emphasize one more time, use section headings. So have a in bold, underlined, executive summary, in bold, introduction, findings, etc. Make sure you're using section heading so I can follow along. Organization is where you're also going to get points. So if it's not organized with section headings, you're going to lose points. So these are easy ways that you can make the paper better. Again, use your past assignments. Everyone did community asset maps. They did the health needs assessment. SMART goals we've already done. So use these past assignments as you work to build this paper. Good luck. I look forward to reading them.